Okay, during last lesson we were looking at the secular festival of 17 BCE in the inscription, which you can see here on the page. You should all have seen this either in class or downloaded it since. What I want to look at today is the set text which goes alongside that, which is on the right hand side here, which is from Horace, who wrote the festival hymn, the Carmen Saeculare, which was performed. And we know that from this inscription, where it tells us exactly that fact, that Horace wrote it, and that 27 boys and 27 girls sung a hymn which had been composed by Horace. So we know the context that was used, and we know the situation when it was used and who sung it. You can see here the emphasis as well on Apollo and Diana. We're going to see that in the poem, and then there's a Galinsky passage which makes the same point as well and draws things from that. So the Carmen Saeculare runs as follows. You can open it up in your own packs as well. Do remember you can just pause videos if you need to find bits that I'm showing. The texts that I'm showing and using are in the folder on Google Drive as well. So the text says, "O Phoebus and Diana, queen of the woodlands, bright heavenly glories, both worshipped forever and cherished forever, now grant what we pray for at this sacred time." So you can see Galinsky drawing attention to the fact that Phoebus, so that's Apollo, and Diana, who in the Greek is Artemis, are effectively words 1 and 2 of this poem, and they are left and right on the prima porta as well, and of course Apollo has that direct association with Augustus as well. So there's quite a lot going on even in those first sort of 3 words of the poem. When Sibylline verses have issued their warning to innocent boys and the virgins we've chosen to sing out their song to the gods who have shown their love for the 7 hills. So the innocent boys and the virgins we've chosen clearly is that reference to the 27 boys and the 27 girls who have been chosen. They're singing a song to the gods who have shown their love for the 7 hills, and of course the 7 hills is Rome. The Sibylline verses, you'll remember, Augustus had collected those, removed fraudulent ones and burned the rest. The good ones were kept in the Temple of Apollo on the Palatine, so it makes sense in a poem with a focus, to some degree, on Apollo and Diana. "O kindly sun in your shining chariot, who herald the day, then hide it to be born again, new yet the same, you will never know anything mightier than Rome." So kindly sun in your shining chariot again might make you think of the prima porta and the band across the top with Kylus and the sun. It might well make you think, and Galinsky makes this point in the passage in the Google folder, of the syncretism which emerged between the sun and Apollo. So syncretism is where 2 gods who are apparently very similar are identified as being the same god. So rather as if you talking to a Muslim and said, "Oh, I have an omnipotent God, you have an omnipotent God, I bet they're the same God with 2 different names." And that happens with Apollo and the sun quite frequently. So you might even think this verse sort of starts, "O kindly Apollo," as well. "You'll never know anything mightier than Rome." Well, if the sun won't know anything mightier than Rome, then clearly Rome is as mighty as you can get, because the sun sees everything. Then we're told, "O gentle Ilithia, duly revealing the child at full term, now protect gentle mothers, whether you'd rather be known as Lucina or Genitalis." So Ilithia is the Greek goddess of childbirth, so obviously childbirth reveals the child at full term. So there's a real focus in this poem on fertility and children. You might well think of the Areopagus and the Tellus panel. Different names exist there for Ilithia as well. "Goddess, nurture our offspring, bring to fruition the Senate's decrees concerning the wedlock of women, who will bear us more of our children, and the laws of marriage." So this is something we're going to pick up on in the year or so before the secular games. Augustus had passed what are known as the Julian laws on marriage, which is something we're going to focus in on. And the poem clearly makes reference to those as the Senate's decrees concerning, so wedlock is marriage of women and who will bear us children. So there's a real focus again, so you think Ilithia and childbirth, genitalis, doesn't need much comment, and then laws on childbirth. So the fixed cycle of years, 10 times 11, which is 110, will bring back the singing again, bring back the games. We crowd to 3 times by daylight, as often by beautiful night. So it's a festival every 110 years, although it hasn't been held all that frequently. This actually fits into the question that you could be asked about Augustus returning religious festivals which had fallen out of favour or had been neglected. You think Horace 3:6, and neglected gods may bring many woes. 3 times by day, 3 times by night. But if you go through the inscription on the secular games, you will see there are day and night performances. And you, the fates who are truthful in prophecy, link happy destinies as has once been ordained, and let the certain course of events confirm it to those that are past. And the fates are indeed again mentioned in here. There we are, the fates who got 9 ewe lambs. The earth that is fruitful in crops and in cattle adorn our carers. So earth is Tellus. So the Tellus panel, you think Tellus at the bottom of the Areopagus and the Prima Porta. Adorn our carers, so that's grain, crops, fertility with garlands of wheat ears. May Jupiter's life-giving rain and breezes ripen the harvest. Gentle, peaceful Apollo, lay down your arms. That's Apollo again. There are notes on this on the right hand side, and you might want to dip into those. It refers to a Saeculum, it refers to the Julian laws, which we're going to see a lot more of as well. It tells you about how it was spread over the days, the focus on the fates, on Ilithia and on Tellus. It doesn't make as much emphasis as Galinsky does on the Apollo and Diana focus, and I think that's perhaps a miss. It does point out that the Latin is pretty mangled, but suggests that's because a poem that you're belting out at full volume. It's more about the sound, perhaps, than the beauty of the language. Then it carries on. Listen now to the young lads' supplications, to their prayers. Luna, crescent-horned queen of the constellation, so Luna is the moon, moon Diana, give ear to the girls. If Rome is your doing, and if far from Ilium came that band of people who reached the Tuscan shore, those commanded to change their home and their city on a lucky course. So this is that myth of Rome as having been founded by the Trojan refugees. Ilium is Troy, and they've reached the Tuscan, so the Italian shore, and founded a city. They were led, those for whom Aeneas, the survivor, who passed without injury through the flames of Troy, prepared a path to freedom, destined to grant him much more than he had lost. So that's clearly a reference back to Virgil's Aeneid, which is only 2 years old at this time, and Virgil and Horace had been friends, so there's a clear nod to his friend and his friend's masterpiece in there. Then, you divinities, show our receptive youth virtue. Grant peace and quiet to the old. Give children. So it's children again. There's a lot of children going on in this poem. And wealth to the people of Romulus. So that's the Roman people. And every glory. Whatever a noble descendant of Venus, and Anchises asks. Anchises was Aeneas' father. So Anchises and Venus give birth to Aeneas. So, and the noble descendant of that must be Augustus. Yes, asked with a white steer's sacrifice. Well, you don't have to think too hard to think that actually we know that Augustus and Agrippa both sacrificed a steer, which means a bull. There we go. So in the Capitolium, Imperator Kaiser Augustus sacrificed a proper bull to Jupiter, best and greatest, and Marcus Agrippa sacrificed another. Well, there we've got a descendant of Venus and Anchises, so that's Augustus sacrificing a bull. Let him obtain a winner in wool, and merciful to our fallen foe. And there's a reference there again to Virgil of the Roman mission, to war down the proud and to pardon the defeated. A line which is also going to be echoed in the Res Gestae, and one that you will see a great deal next year in the Aeneid. Now the Parthians fear our forces, powerful on land and on sea they fear the Alban axes. So the Alban axes are the fasces, they're the symbols of Rome's authority. We've seen those on the Areopagus. The Parthians fear our forces because in 20 BCE they gave back the standards. So they have now been cowed, they have been pushed down. Now the once proud Indians, now the Scythians beg for an answer. And Augustus did receive, and was proud to receive, embassies from India. What they thought he could do for them from Rome is another question. There's no evidence he ever did anything for them, but he was proud that they came to see him. Now faith and peace, honour and ancient modesty dare to return once more with neglected virtue. Again, you think that has to be almost talking to Horace 3:6, that now Augustus is in charge, all the ancient modesty is back. Blessed plenty dares to appear again now with her flowing horns. That's obviously a cornucopia. So we've got babies, we've got modesty, we've got virtue, we've got plenty, we've got cornucopias. It's everywhere. It's just oodles and oodles of it. May Phoebus, so that's Apollo again, the augur. So when you think augur, Augustus, that's not a mistake. So Phoebus as an augur, as a fortune teller. Decked with the shining bow, Phoebus who's dear to the 9 muses, that Phoebus who can offer relief to a weary body with his healing art. So Apollo was a healer and a fortune teller. May he, if he favours the Palatine altars, so Apollo, the Palatine, that's where Augustus had built the temple of Palatine Apollo, it makes sense then to do a poem or a hymn about that on the Palatine. May he extend Rome's power and Latium's good fortune through the fresh ages, show always improvement, lustra ever anew. So a lustra, we've seen that in the Res Gestae, is a purification ritual, and Augustus has carried it out for the first time in a long time. May Diana, so we've got Apollo, Diana, to whom is the Aventine and Mount Algidus, so another part of Rome, accept the entreaties of the 15. So the 15, we know the Quindecemviri are the priests who led and organised this festival. Here they are over here. It says, for instance, 110 matrons to whom notice had been sent by summons of the Quindecemviri of sacred affairs held Celisternia, with 2 seats up for Juno and Diana. And we know Celisternia, just to remind you, is of course a feast, but with chairs left empty for the gods, so they are sort of held with the gods at the same time. We bear to our home the fine hope and certain that such is Jupiter's and all the gods' purpose. We are taught, we the chorus, so that's the 54 children, Horace speaks through them, to sing praise of Phoebus, praise of Apollo, praise of Diana. So there's a real emphasis in here on Apollo and on Diana, and they are part of this golden age. There's a huge focus on fertility and plenty and babies and moral virtue, and there's a great deal of that in this poem and in the Julian laws which had come in the year before, and therefore in a sense it speaks back to Horace 3:6. And the questions I'm going to be setting, and have set I suppose by the time you listen to this, really pick up on those things as well. So I've put the Galinsky in the Google Drive as well, and I've highlighted a particular passage from page 161. Most of this section is on the cuirass of the Augustus statue from Prima Porta, so you could read that through in terms of understanding that as well if you want. There's some really nice close-ups, for instance, of the conquered nations, but the bit I'm interested in is on page 161, and if I just zoom in a little bit more, there we go, you can see a more relevant question is to what extent the programme of images, that's on the Prima Porta, was influenced by the secular games for which planning was proceeding at the time. So if the statues are around about 20 BCE, the games are in 17, then by the time that statue is being built, the games are underway, they are planning them. The festival, as we saw earlier, was restructured by Augustus to give prominence to Apollo and Diana, And that idea of restructuring is something that is really key with Augustus. So there's often a return to ancient ritual, so they've had secular games before, but it is redone in a new way. It's reworked, rethought, and made useful for him. And the focus becomes Apollo and Diana, as is evident from Horace's secular hymn, as I think we've just seen quite clearly. And then he is going to draw some connections between those. Now, Galinsky has some really interesting things to say about this idea of a golden age. That's what the secular games were celebrating, a new golden age, even though, as he points out, Horace never mentions the term golden age in his actual hymn, but the whole hymn is about a better age, a new time with upright morality and with plenty. And it is all about the golden age. Galinsky has a text, and it's referred to at the bottom here, talking about, as we saw earlier, part of Virgil's intention in his hymning of the Augustus is aurea, itis. So aurea is gold, and itis is an age. So that's the golden age. In Aeneid 6 was to bring in Augustus's moral, social reforms in the years before the revival of the Ludisist games. So Ludi Saeculares is the secular games. So that's coming next lesson, really. I'm going to throw some of Virgil at you and new ways of redefining a golden age, because the traditional meaning of a golden age doesn't actually fit with the Augustan age. So one of the questions that appeared in the folder from those of you who had dipped in was exactly that one about, is there a connection between the secular games and the Julian laws? I think that was from Charles. And so I'm just opening that now. So Charles has asked, was chastity a key moral message that Augustus wanted to push for through his secular games? If so, why? So I think chastity, you need to be careful with the word chastity. So I think childbirth within marriage would be a better way to think about it than chastity. So it's not like a nun being chaste. Not at all. You should have lots and lots of bouncing babies. So was that a key moral message Augustus wanted to push for through his secular games? If so, why? And would it link to his Julian laws? So I hope, Charles and others, that that's clear actually now. There are direct references to the Julian laws in the secular hymn. So absolutely he wants that point. And the idea of a golden age with moral purpose is something that he wants to make a great deal of. So I'm going to stop the video at this point. You will want to first of all go through your text of the hymn and annotate it, pick out the things we've referred to there, make use of the notes as well to clarify any bits further, and then there are going to be some questions as well that will ask you quite a lot about the secular hymn in addition. We are going to have a session coming up very shortly on the Julian laws themselves, which Charles, as I say, has already alluded to there. But you could find out more about those in advance if you want to. Can I remind you that it's really important that you tick that you have done this session, so I know that everyone's keeping up to speed, and that you click submit on the work in Google Drive, so I know you've done it. You can go in and have a look and check you've understood it. Can I further suggest that you need to find a way to store this stuff? So you could, for instance, be printing it off and putting it in your folder if you have a printer at home, but I've already been contacted by at least one student say they don't have a printer. So I really don't want you just to have this work loose somewhere in the ether where you don't know where it is. Do find yourself an organising process, whether that's just storing them with dates and names in a folder, which is okay, or I've already suggested something like OneNote, which I use. So you can see here in OneNote you can put in a table, you can put in text, you could insert, I'll just insert a file. So if I take one from the desktop, we have Mark Bradley's Smell and the Ancient Senses. I could attach that folder. So if that had been the work I'd set, so I could then annotate it Bradley on the senses. So then you could have the work I'm setting with your comments around it. That might be something that would be useful for you. I don't know, there are lots of ways, but it's really important you find a way to keep on top of what's going on. So ideally print off what you're being sent when it makes sense to do so, and certainly be annotating into your pack the comments that I am making when they are useful. Really important you keep on uploading questions. I'm not always going to know what you don't get unless you tell me. Okay, so do upload your questions, do tick off your presents, and do find a sensible way of storing your materials. And have a nice time at home.